Oh, I didn't see y'all come in. Welcome, welcome. It's good to see you guys again. So today I have a special treat. I am going to talk about my latest green purple deck. I am so excited to share that with you guys, and let's get right into it actually. This is Yasuo. Oh wait, never mind. Wrong green purple deck. Here we are. So this is the deck that I took to the top 8 finish, um, split finish of the Sharp 10K tournament that happened past weekend. It is very unique, not only for the metagame, for what everyone expected from it, but from me entirely. As you notice, there are only 8 1-drops in this deck. No, I'm not ill. It's was a very thoughtful choice to run a higher off the ground control-esque deck. I still think this is probably a tempo deck at heart, but it really plays out like a control one. And I'm really excited to talk with you guys not only about the deck, but about everything that went in to the theory behind making it. Let's start not with the list, but with set 10 itself and some of the most impactful cards I have seen out of it and expected to shake up the meta on a release weekend tournament. Here I have my top picks for every color out of set 10. Not all these picks are the same, unfortunately. Some got more of a boost than others, but I'd still like to talk about them and how I imagine them impacting the meta going forward. Amber was a color that got probably a few less tools than others, but the ones they got are incredibly impactful. Mowgli Man Cub. When you play this character, chosen opponent reveals their hand and discards a non-character card of their choice. This allows Amber decks like Amber Steel to have some counterplay to your opponent's powerful board wipe combos or the so devastating Under the Sea. Raja is a simple card on paper, 3 cost, 3/4 stat line, bodyguard. This card is just kind of a house, and it established itself so early in the game. If you're not going into a matchup where they can threaten a very strong 3-drop like a giant cobra, I could see Raja going the distance for a more aggressive Amber deck. And then my favorite of the Amber releases is Mickey Mouse Amber Champion. 4 cost, inkable, 2/5 stat line. Your other Amber characters get +2 willpower. That alone is a very strong effect, but he gets better. While you have 2 or more other Amber characters in play, this character gains Singer 8. Notably, this works for dual ink, so if they are dual Amber plus something else, you can enable this effect. And this caught my eye because I've always been a fan of the Circle of Life dog decks, the Circle of Life tramp decks, and I think this was an excellent push for that deck to find its place in the meta and really establish it as a top tier threat. So going in to this weekend, I knew to keep it in mind. I knew to practice some games against it. Amethyst got some very powerful cards, of course. Junior Woodchuck Guidebook. Insert this item, pay 1 ink, banish this item to draw 2 cards. So it's kind of like a hard cast Friends on the Other Side for any Amethyst deck. I do think this works probably the best in Blurple. I think being able to add this back with Tamatoa Happy as a Clam, the 6-drop, is so powerful because every one of these guidebooks that you add back is essentially like adding back 2 popsicles previously. It's just a lot of cards that can come through, and you don't mind the extra ink cost in these hyper late game scenarios you find yourself in a Sapphire heavy meta. Which, spoilers, we're in a Sapphire heavy meta. Hades looking for a deal, 5 cost inkable, 3/4 stat line. Ability, what do you say? When you play this character, you may choose an opposing character. If you do, draw 2 cards, unless that character's player puts that card on the bottom of the deck. So essentially it's either a Dragonfire or a Friends on the Other Side on a 5-cost body. Very impactful card, very powerful card. I do think it sells in different kinds of decks. I do think some decks it's not as strong in as others, but this really stuck out to me as an Emerald Amethyst card from the get-go. Just a card I would really see myself utilizing and abusing in a deck that can have a lot of low cost, high lore characters that you can throw out if they give you the draw. And then if they give you the Dragonfire, that's fantastic. It's a 5-cost inkable 3/4 that removes an opponent's character. I felt like this card in most cases would be a win-win scenario, but it definitely depends on the deck and the amount of pressure you're putting on with it. And then the final Amethyst card is a 6-cost inkable, Demona, Scourge of the Wyvern, Scourge of the Wyvern clan, 5/6 stat line, quest for 2. This is the first gargoyle I'm going to talk about in this list, and these guys really did make a splash on the meta, and especially in the pre-release testing I was doing. When you play this character, insert all opposing characters. Then each player with fewer than 3 cards in hand draw until they have 3. So you have a hugely impactful board presence here. If you are in any kind of a stalemate, Demona can just break it on the spot. But beyond that, she also is a draw engine that works very well in combination with her second effect, which is an effect shared by all gargoyles. If you Stone by Day, get used to that. You're going to hear it a lot this set. When you have 3 or more cards in your hand, this character can't ready. So very thematically, Demona is a counter to all gargoyles in the meta because they all share this Stone by Day attribute. Very powerful card. I expected her to make a huge impact on everything in the meta. Emerald, we have some really fun ones and some very exciting ones. So we'll start with the more fun one. Definitely an underrated card, but is very likely going to always be in a more aggressive style deck. Scrooge McDuck, SHUSH Agent. Shush Agent. This is a 2-cost, uninkable, 0/2 stat line, quest for 2. So the quest for 2 is good, but everything else less so. When you play this character, draw a card, then choose and discard a card. This is not a may, this is mandatory. You have to resolve this effect every time you play it, so sometimes you're just milling yourself. But it works very well in conjunction with Scrooge's second effect. When this character is challenged, return this card to your hand. No damage is dealt in that challenge, so they are not banishing this Scrooge. So your Scrooge can quest in front of a Calhoun or anything else that can potentially gain some profit over banishing it in a challenge and just pop itself back to your hand. This card is incredible and requires the right kind of deck around it. I do think it excels in Emerald Amethyst, but it can definitely find its way into other strategies. It's a card that pushes the game state along without any threat to yourself. So if you played any other 3/2 or 0/2 that quests for 2, it would get banished in a challenge and you'd lose that card. Whereas Scrooge requires your opponent to use some kind of removal on him, or else he's going to be threatening 2 lore every turn of the game, which can push a clock along incredibly fast. I love this card. Probably my second favorite card in the set. Next card to talk about, 3-cost inkable, Malicious, Mean, and Scary. Action song, put 1 damage counter on each opposing character. Spoiler alert, this enables a very strong combo with this 9-cost Prince Philip here. This character is a 9-cost, 6/6, quest for 3. He's been around for, I think, since Ursula's Return is when Prince Philip came out. A very powerful character that hasn't gotten a lot of love because there hasn't been any ways to abuse him up until now. But now, when So, hold on, let me finish this effect. When you play this character, banish all opposing damage characters. And he has a shift 6 and a warded shift target. This creates a devastating combo to have a one-sided board wipe and a 3-quester. Definitely similar vibes to Sisu Empowered Sibling from pre-rotation Lorcana meta. Just a insanely deceptively powerful card. And at the end of the day, it's still a half a grab your swords. It's an inkable, deal 1 damage to everything. There's a lot of times that it's just a good card where you can either find some favorable trades or even use it as a board wipe to a opponent's board that has been heavily challenged. Yeah. Incredibly strong card, and we are not the only deck in the meta that is going to look to abuse that, as we'll talk about in a minute. Finally, we have my favorite card in the set, and one of my favorite Emerald cards of all time. She's getting up there very quickly, but Webby Vanderquack, Junior Prospector, 4-cost inkable, 2/4, quest for 2, with ward, and shift 2. Very important, that shift 2. Effect work smarter. I love the thematic naming of Webby's effect here. It's just really funny when I look at this card and all the potential behind it. We'll talk about that as we get into the deck, but whenever this character quests, if an opponent has more cards in their inkwell than you may put the top card of your deck into your inkwell face down and inserted. They did it. They gave green ramp. So obviously this card is incredibly powerful into Sapphire decks, but I also believe it has just a lot of potential to being on the draw in many different matchups. This is one of the most impactful cards they've ever given to losing dice rolls or going second. Sometimes it feels flat out optimal to go second with Webby and jump your opponent's ink totals with her powerful ramp effect. This card is very insightful. It takes a while to practice and learn the appropriate situations in which to use her and how to set up your hand around utilizing Webby's effect, but incredibly rewarding once you get used to it. Fantastic card, 10 out of 10. Thank you, Ravensburger, for Webby Vanderquack. I'll briefly go over some Ruby cards that caught my eye. I say briefly, not to be disrespectful, but Ruby has been struggling since post-rotation. Went from being very likely the most powerful color in Lorcana, or probably second to Sapphire, but one of the most outwardly powerful colors, to having a really hard time finding success. This set gave Ruby some really interesting tools. Tinkerbell's just a 1-cost 3/1. Nothing super special, just mostly will take down, can trade up, or you can just quest in the face of anything and take it down in a trade with you. Diablo Watchful Raven, 2-cost uninkable, 3/3 stat line, quest for 2. Just another similar thought. With these two cards, you have the backbone for a very aggressive deck that has a way to fight back, almost like Amber Steel has been. Ruby can be, just with bigger bodies, is what I thought I might see out of these cards coming forward. And then the last card that caught my eye was a 5-cost uninkable Headless Horseman, Terror of Sleepy Hollow. Such a cool card, and the art on this is fantastic. 4/2 stat line, quest for 2, a little understated for a 5-cost uninkable, but we take those. When you play this character, banish chosen opposing character with 2 strength or less. Vibes of Madame Medusa, not quite there, but there is still a lot of cards that Headless Horseman can take right now. And then during your turn, whenever an opposing character is banished, each of your characters get +1 strength this turn. There's a lot of really interesting ways to abuse this in Ruby, and obviously on turn you take down something with 2 strength, you boost your entire board, and you can suddenly trade up with every character you have on board. Or you can just, if you're going with a more aggressive slant, you can just go sideways and remove something and keep moving. Very cool card. It might take a little bit longer to really find its way into the meta, especially with things shifting and getting bigger and stronger now. But I really just wanted to shout it out. Fascinating card. So we'll go from the color that did, got a decent amount of stuff, but nothing too crazy, to the color that probably got one of the most powerful cards in Lorcana. One of the most powerful cards historically in Lorcana. Of course, I'm talking about Cinderella Dream Come True. 4 cost uninkable, 2/3 stat line, quest for 1. You're saying, Mo, what could this card do to make it be one of the most powerful cards in Lorcana with that stat line? Well, let me tell you. At the end of your turn, if you played a princess character this turn, notably, obviously a princess herself, so she counts the turn you play her, you may put a card from your hand into your inkwell face down to draw a card. Oh, this card is just meta-warpingly powerful. The second I saw her, I knew we would be in a heavy Sapphire meta. Being able to skip from 2 ink to 4 ink to 6 is so strong in different decks. Decks like Blue Steel have powerful ways to abuse this situation. Decks like Blue Green could surprise shift a Clarabelle on turn 5 just out of nowhere. Or turn 4, my goodness, turn 4 they could surprise shift a Clarabelle and sing your welcome out of nowhere, and there's not much you can do about it. They're just taking leaps and bounds on the way the game works, and this card is it really just changes the way that you play the game. Incredibly powerful card, enables some very strong archetypes, and just a massive boost to the struggling color that is Sapphire. Okay, yeah, we all know Sapphire ain't struggling. Hasn't ever been, really. Maybe set 1, but yeah, fantastically powerful card. So I knew going into this weekend this would shape the deck I needed to play. I needed to build something that could beat this card and just, more importantly, not auto lose to it. The other Sapphire cards are a bit less exciting, but still very impactful. Probably the less threatening of the two, definitely. 4 cost inkable action, not a song, action. Sudden Scare. Put chosen opposing character into their player's inkwell face down. That player puts the top card of their deck into their inkwell face down. So you ramp your opponent twice, but you get to have a 4 cost inkable spot removal. I think this card is very powerful in a lot of the late game grindy Sapphire decks. You will very rarely ever want to play this on turn 4. It will almost always go disastrously for you in most matchups out of there. But in the late game, when decks are top decking, it doesn't matter. If you're in a Sapphire Mirror, what is that 2 ink gonna matter? This is a 4 cost inkable Dragonfire, but better. Very strong card, and I think underrated to a certain degree, but it does require the right kind of deck to go about it. And then the more popular, yet still somehow underrated card is a 6 cost uninkable Spooky Sight action. Put all characters with costs of 3 or less into their players' inkwells face down and exerted. Now, this card has brought up a lot of discussion. People are back and forth on it. People say it's incorrect. Some people say it's correct. I am more so sitting aside as the low to the ground tempo player, thinking this card can invalidate my entire archetype because they can play it on turn 4, and it's very hard to outplay that. So this card's existence led me to believe I would not be playing standard green-purple tempo. So if I wanted to play my favorite colors, I needed to adapt. Now this card has turned out less popular, and there's definitely a line that you can abuse these Sapphire decks by taking a lower to the ground aggressive tempo strategy. That if they aren't going to run this card, then you may even have a better matchup against them than the deck I'm going to talk to you about today. But at the end of the day, we're not talking about Sapphire decks too much. I just wanted to say this card was very impactful in my decision making of how to construct my deck. Um, Finally, probably the second most profitable colors from this set, Steel. We'll start with a 4-cost action song. He hurled his Thunderbolt. Does this give you any vibes from maybe a pre-rotation card with Zeus on it? Deal 4 damage to chosen character. Your deity characters gain Challenger +2 this turn. So essentially it is a Zeus, Along Came Zeus light. Dealing 4 damage is still fairly impactful. It removes Genie, it will remove some threats that have accumulated damage, and it's just take out your opponent's Cinderella is what I thought most of the time this card would be used for. Very strong card. And it existing, I knew Steel players would gravitate towards it. People love the removal songs. And I think it was this song that convinced me I was certainly playing a green deck, because I really wanted to be on Ursula Deceiver. I wanted to punish these high song count decks that have an uninkable song that could just get jammed up in their hand on turn 2. Or it's something I can check for later in the game and remove it from them and gain that advantage. So, Spooky Sight means I'm not running tempo or aggro. And he hurled his Thunderbolt means I'm definitely playing green. Probably the second most powerful card in this set, at face value, we'll say, at face value, is Goliath Clan Leader. We finally got to another gargoyle. We talked about Daemonis so long ago, and now here we are. 6-cost Inkable, 6/5 stat line, quest for 2. At the end of each player's turn, if they have more than 2 cards in their hand, they choose and discard cards until they have 2. If they have fewer than 2 cards in hand, they draw until they have 2. Oh my gosh. This card is an advantage generating monster for yourself if you're playing a deck that can empty your hand out fast. And it's very limiting against your opponent who's looking to outdraw and out-resource. In a lot of cases, if you're playing a deck like Blurple, this card says you better have a Hades or you're about to lose your advantage in this game, your resources. And then, of course, Goliath has the Stone by Day trait that all gargoyles have. If you have 3 or more cards in your hand, this character can't ready. So, slight downside to the amazing powerful effects and stat lines these cards have. Seeing this plus Cinderella and just doing the simple math in my head led me to believe, oh, so Blue Steel is back like they never left. Very powerful turn 3 into turn 4 play. Most of the time your opponent will have struggled to get under that 2-card threshold by the end of their turn and will have to either deal with the Goliath or suffer the consequences. And if you're playing another Sapphire deck, sometimes that means you're just going to have to discard down because you cannot play Hades just yet. Another meta warping card here. I did see this card had some weaknesses. Obviously, you don't want to be giving Amber Steel aggro 2 more cards every turn to be your advantage generating card. But still, at the end of the day, I think a lot of those weaknesses are far more manageable than they seemed, and this was overall a just absolutely meta warping demon of a card. And then my last Steel card was honestly a toss-up between a lot. Steel got a lot of really cool tools this set. Shout out to the 3-cost 4/4 Gargoyle that has Alert, which is a new keyword that allows you to challenge evasive things on your turn. Steel got an Inkable 3/3 2-cost, which is very powerful for decks like Purple Steel that was running Raja previously. Raja has the Vanish trait that is a bit of a downside, but the new card does not. But the card I wanted to talk about is Headless Horseman Cursed Rider. 8-cost Inkable, 5/7 stat line, quest for 2. Shift 5. The shift I haven't seen come up an awful lot, but there are shift targets for it out there. So if you see the shift come up, be very wary. If you see like a Headless Horseman you haven't heard of before come up, be very wary that something might be brewing behind it. But when you play this character, each player draws 3 cards, then discards 3 cards at random. Choose an opposing character and deal 2 damage to them for each action card discarded this way. This has made some of the most funny situations I've seen, where people all the time have discussions. People are rolling dice to decide which random card to rip from your opponent's hand. Um, we're in such an action-heavy meta. There are very few. Just there, I mean, all decks are somewhat character dominated, but like, there's still just so many powerful actions, and in a lot of cases, this was just a steal Maleficent Dragon. Just you play it for a high ink cost, and it blows up a card. Not always. You can get some bad beats with this card, but a lot of times, like, you need just what 2 to 3 hits between both players to remove most of the larger threats in the game. Oh yeah, he could get there. Yeah, so that's why I wanted to feature Headless Horseman. All this to say, all this talking without talking much about green purple is to say, in my head, I was forming a tier list. I was thinking of the strongest decks in the game and how would I build a deck to beat them. Speaking of tier lists, I made one. Here we are. We're a tier list content channel now. Starting from the top, strongest decks in the format. After seeing the new releases, I decided they would be Blue Steel. Sapphire Steel, I think, has just some of the craziest combos with Cinderella and some of just the most powerful plays in the game at this point. Amethyst Steel, I feel like this deck got a decent amount of boost, and for the most part, it's the decks that it was weak to did not get a whole lot of things to exploit that weakness. So like, we'll talk about green blue that I also have as a highest like S tier deck, did not get a lot of inherent things to patch up their weakness against a deck like purple steel. Like, the combo is great, it's fantastic, it's huge, but purple steel can still just kind of do their game plan and just be this resilient archetype that people have a hard time catching up to. Emerald Sapphire, the Prince Philip combo that we've talked about, which consists of the Shift Prince Philips and the Malicious, Mean, and Scary to wipe your opponent's board out from under them, is a huge tool. That deck gets to it the fastest. It can start threatening at, turn 5 at the earliest, generally? Maybe turn 4 if you have a double ramp into Prince Philip play. Very strong, very scary, and at the end of the day, after you've board wiped them, or after they board wiped you, they have a 6/6 evasive questing for 3 every turn. They can be so much faster and just require answers out of you just so fast now. But I decided those 3 would be the most powerful. The next ones, as I was figuring things out, I knew Emerald Amethyst would be strong. I thought we had far too many tools to not be one of the most powerful decks in the meta, and it just depends on how we adjust if we could conquer. Blurple, I think, has taken a step down this set, but I think people who are calling it dead or saying it's lost its steam, I have not played it much this format. They obtained actual weaknesses, but the deck is still incredibly strong. And I think, if anything, they have the strongest resource generation in the late game out of any deck, while still having the spot removal for Clarabelle, Goliath, just everything that can come up to threaten them. So Blurple, step down, but still not bad. And then I knew Amber Emerald dog decks would be very strong. Either the aggro variant, if Spooky Sight was not a commonly played card, I felt like the aggro variant can just run away with games like it's always been able to. Or you could switch to a more higher off the ground Amber Emerald Songs deck, where you circle life massive targets and can even threaten the Prince Philip combo on your own. So those 6 I thought would take up the majority of the field as just great choices. We've taken such a wide turn, a wide shift to the meta since Fabled. It's really fascinating to me to see us go from a format where it's really just 2 or 3 decks take up the majority of it, to one where I just said we have 6 decks that can all fly in and out of tier 1. Fascinating. Decks that I had tested and wanted to deem as strong, but I could not quite crack, where Amber Steel, still a very strong deck, still does all the same things it does before, but Sapphire decks just got a little bit faster. They got a little bit more tools. It's a lot harder for Amber Steel to function against a Tinkerbell on turn 4, Tinkerbell Giant Fairy on turn 4. I don't think Amber Steel's bad by any means. I just think the amount they gained versus what they lost was, or what others gained, was not quite as much. Mowgli is still an amazing card, but I think there will have to be adaptations for this strategy moving forward. Green Steel, I think, got some really interesting boosts and can play very similar to the deck I'm going to show you today. I think Green Steel is a little underexplored, but very powerful in theory. And good old Red Purple, Ruby Amethyst, I think was very strong. I think there's a lot of underexplored things to this archetype, mostly because it has Ruby in it. Ruby is very difficult to make work as a color right now, but I do think Ruby Amethyst has the combination to make it click. So there we go. We have 9 decks now that are all decks you could expect to see at a tournament. You should not be surprised. Very solid picks. Then we have 3. I really made this aesthetic, didn't I? 3 on each. That was not intentional. It just kind of ended up working out that way. Underexplored, but not bad. So these are archetypes that are trying to do something very different. I think they're, red-blue was such a known quantity for the year that it was around that currently it's a little lost. It has powerful cards, it has powerful combos, but it's just finding the correct formula and way to make it click that isn't just trying to imitating red-blue from the past. I don't think that's possible. That deck was the strongest deck in the game for the first year of Lorcana overall, I would think. Amber Sapphire is really cool. Lots of power plays, lots of powerful options. They gain some consistency and some cards that are effectively draw now. Really cool deck, just a little underexplored, and there's just a lot to figure out there behind this color combination. Similar thoughts to Amber Amethyst. This is a color combination I've always been really fond of, and I think playing it as a more mid-rangey deck with a high lore density into it is so strong. I couldn't figure out the path to make it click. I would not be surprised if someone else does. And it's still very early into the format. Finally, we have the Ruby tier, red. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's tricky to make these decks work because they didn't get what they needed to set. In the case of Christmas, Christmas is lacking consistent draw outside of Clarabelle, Light on Her Hooves. So you just kind of have to hope your mulligan goes in your favor. Christmas can be very powerful. There are crazy plays it can do. So I saw a Christmas combo deck from this past weekend that I think it accomplished like 14 lore in a turn or something wild. I think if the deck got consistent draw, it would be just an absolute menace to society. But as far as Whispers, I did not see it gain a lot to help in that department. Ruby Steel. The biggest problem about Ruby Steel is it really needs your opponents to do something to punish. It's another deck that I believe in. I fully believe it can get there, but it struggles. It struggles a lot of the time because it has to rely on your opponent doing things that it can exploit. And when you play it into decks that aren't just aggro, that are going sideways, it is a lot harder to find success, especially into our Sapphire heavy metas. And finally, Amber Ruby just does not have a lot going for it right now. Racers are cool. I like the racers. They need a little bit more support probably, but overall, it's just it's a color combination that's missing a little something, if you know what I mean. But this was my expected share of the meta. The decks I thought I would have a great chance of seeing were up here. I thought it might be possible to see decks here. And then these ones I did not expect to see, or at least see. If I did see, I would be very surprised to see what they brought to the table at least, especially if it's something I hadn't figured out yet. So keeping this in mind, let's move on to the deck list finally. Hello, my friends. Are you enjoying the video? Certainly hope so. I just want to take a second to talk about my Metafy. I'm on Metafy, if you don't already know. I have just released my in-depth text guide for this deck. Tons and tons of information. I think if you look down here at the word count, it adds up pretty close to 30,000 words. Just a lot of time spent on compiling my thoughts for this deck. And I packed it up in one guide. Also on Metafy, I offer coaching sessions one-on-one. I'm going to start group coaching sessions once a week for certain supporters and twice a month for others. And I will also be attempting something called Mo Mondays. In these, I will look at the weekly results of tournaments that happened over the weekend and just kind of talk about shifts I see in the meta and just really cool decks or cards that I find. And these will all be just available to my subscribers on Metafy. To talk about it just a little bit, I never want to be paywalled, but I also need to find it can be tricky to find time to do what I love, which is talk to people about this game. So don't be afraid. I'm not leaving YouTube. I'm going to keep the free content coming. I will always be a resource you can ask any question in the world to. But to anyone who has the means and is willing to support me in this way, I appreciate that so much. It allows me to take time away from work to work on this and to release things for you guys. And I don't have to give up time with my daughter to do that. I love it. I thank y'all so much. The support has just been incredibly heartwarming and overwhelming so far. But anyways, I'm on Metafy. Check it out if it's something that interests you. If it's not, that is okay too. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll keep things coming on YouTube. Let me know anything you guys want to see. I think next week we're going to do a little bit, I'm going to have an outsider interview, and we're going to discuss Blue Steel together. So if you're interested in learning how to play that deck, that's coming next week. Anyways, get back to the video. Y'all enjoy. This is the 62 cards I took to a top 8 finish at the Sharp release weekend 10K. Shout out to Sharp, fantastic store in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Some good friends of mine run it and teammates. It is a just great place to be. It's hard to get in and out of Fort Smith, but if you ever have the chance to go to a tournament there, definitely do it. They will not disappoint. 62 cards. I have went with an almost control oriented approach to this deck. I did not want to lose a game to Spooky Sight. I didn't want to just lose to this card. I may be completely overrating it. It's a Sapphire heavy meta. Why would you play this? It's terrible and every other expected top tier deck in the meta besides Purple Steel. And Purple Steel, it's not super amazing either. But I did not love the idea of just losing a game because my deck's too slow to get under this card. I wanted to go a little bit over the top. I wanted to have the ability to go late game and scrap with these blue decks, to scrap with these Sapphire decks. And at the heart of it, through all the testing and noticing how difficult of a concept that was to accomplish, I noticed two things. On one side of it, the draw engine behind Amethyst would often give me advantages in the late game, and Clarabelle as well. And two, I felt, I just every time I tested the Prince Philip combo, I just felt it was more and more necessary to deal with these incredibly powerful Sapphire boards. You look at Sapphire Steel, and they have a 2/8 that quests for 3, a 3/6 that quests for 2, a 4/5 that quests for 2, a 1,000,005 that quests for 2. That one's Namari. It always has 1,000,000, I just assume. And it's just really difficult to get over these stat lines playing nearly every other deck in the meta. You can't just like turn it sideways and swing an Elsa 5th Spirit and take care of these monstrosities. You had to have something to give you that edge. And I felt like that was the theory behind why the Prince Philip combo was good here. The numbers on the combo have changed dramatically for me quite a bit. I found myself really being able to utilize the 3 cost in different kinds of situations. And since I get to such a high ink total, the 9 cost felt pretty good as 4 as well. The weakest part of it was the malicious, mean, and scary, but I did not feel comfortable dropping it below 3. But core concept of the deck, I wanted the ability to outdraw these decks in the late game, and I wanted the ability to take out their board out from under them with one quick blow. Let's talk about each individual card and why I picked it, and then I have a couple more iterations of the deck that I would like to talk to you about and my changes. Our 1 costs. We have Flynn Rider, 1 cost, 1/2. Boost 2. Boost is a new mechanic introduced in Whispers of the Well, where you pay a certain amount of ink. Once per turn, you may pay a certain amount of ink, this effect, to put the top card of your deck face down under this character. And then Flynn Rider, while there's a card under this character, he gains +2 strength and +1 lore. So he is a 1 cost that effectively can threaten being a 3 strength character, and he can effectively gain lore in the late game. When I was looking at other cards, Rafiki had this slot for so long, and then I started testing Flynn Rider, and I'm like, oh, this card is fantastic. Rafiki can swing. Rafiki is the 0/2 Challenger +3, just to catch y'all up, that was very popular in Blurple last set. Rafiki can take something out in a challenge, but then he's just free for your opponent to remove after that. Whereas Flynn Rider can take something out, stick damage on the clapback when they attack you back, and then you just be an effective lore threat in the late game. You go and you have a massive Clarabelle draw, and then you play out like 2 or 3 Flynn Riders, and suddenly those 3 cards, those 2 or 3 cards, is threatening 4 to 6 lore on your opponent's turn, and they have to deal with the standing card. So strong. Boost is another mechanic that I was fascinated with, and have done a lot of testing on to how to abuse this mechanic fully. If you don't know, whenever you have a card on top of another card and that card gets sent somewhere, whether to the discard or back to your hand, the cards under it goes with it. So if you boost a Flynn Rider, if you boost him 3 times and then bounce him with a Madam M Elephant, those 3 cards that were under that Flynn Rider are going to go straight into your hand. So you could be like, why would you boost him 3 times? Well, because I had the ink and I wanted to draw a card later on. The downsides from it are few and far between, especially when you're playing a deck without too many 1-ofs. So, fantastic card. Love the boost mechanic. I would take a second to talk about it. Being able to do something proactive with your turn without losing a card for it is amazing. Like, it's almost like drawing a card. If you go turn 2, ink, boost Flynn Rider, instead of playing a 2-cost card, you get to keep that card in hand. You get to structure your opening mulligans based on this card being your turn 1 and your turn 2. And that frees up so much thinking whenever it comes to this deck. Webby Vanderquack. 1 cost inkable, 1/2 stat line. When you play this character, chosen character gets +1 strength this turn. This card is just absolutely fine by itself. Like, this effect is something we've seen things do in the past to some extent. Maybe not, maybe a little bit better, but it's just a fine 1-drop. But the truth be told behind it, it's to enable the shift. Shift 2 Webby, or the 4-cost Shift 2 Webby, I think is just one of the strongest anti-Sapphire plays in the game. And it's one of the strongest on the draw plays in the game right now. Webby is such a fascinating card to me because her value is very apparent in Sapphire, or against Sapphire. You know, they're going to ramp, they're going to always be putting cards in their inkwell, and this is your way to catch up, this is your way to threaten things. But finding Webby value into other matchups, especially being on the play, is really interesting. Something I talk about and will talk about in my throughout this and in my guide is doubling up on ink for the turn. So if you say have Shift Webby and another 2 cost in your hand, you can skip inking on 2 and wait for your opponent to ink to 3, and then get your Webby quest, go to 3 ink to 4, and then ink the next turn to go to 5, and just be able to threaten going straight from 2 to 5 in between your opponent's turn, and just ends up being a really fantastic use of this card. A lot of times it just saves you from having to ink a card out of your hand, but if you think about it, you can structure that to being able to keep powerful late game cards like your Prince Philip, Clarabelle, Demona, Hades, and having them for later and getting there faster or at the same time. The Webby Shift line is an amazing card. I'm going to build so many decks with these two. I would love Enchanteds, but $140 is probably a little bit out of my range at the moment. But yeah, wonderful card. Now, Iago Stompin' Mad, 2 cost inkable, 0/2, challenger +5. This card was between 3 different slots the day before the event. I wanted something to cover for aggro and purple steel. I was considering running Improvise, which is the 1 cost action, give something +1 and draw a card, mostly to blow up their illusions or their giant cobra, their Rajas, and stay at positive cards in hand. I thought Hidden Cove could be a really interesting way to force trades in my favor and be a combat trick to utilize during my turn. So I can, it looks like they can quest in front of me and then suddenly I play a Cove and swing the board out from under them. Very strong card. I just didn't love the downsides there. Finally, I landed on Iago. It's just like the coughing baby versus hydrogen bomb meme, and what better way to threaten their entire board than playing a 2 cost that can remove their 6 cost. This card overperformed. I did remove him from the deck in my latest version, but I definitely would revisit depending on how the meta shapes up. Just amazing card. Oh, Go-Go. This is a card you probably haven't heard of before. We don't need to talk about it much, but no, this gives us such an edge in late game scenarios because we have control tools, we have draw tools, and Go-Go can just be game closing tools. We live in a heavily high willpower format, high willpower world where these Sapphire decks are playing things with 6 or more willpower, and that's just a win condition for Go-Go. If you stack them in your hand and get to 8 ink and put 5 damage on a Hades, there's half of the game right there, gone. Being a more control-oriented deck with this kind of lore threat gives you just certain edge playing against other mid-range or control-oriented decks. The only matchup she does not find a great place in is the more aggressive decks, so Amber Steel, Amber Emerald aggro dogs. But overall, I always find a way to make this card work. I think she's my favorite card in Lorcana, especially now that Goat is gone, and I will try to find a way to play her in every deck I ever play. If you're looking and you feel like this isn't the card for you, that's okay. Take her out. You can replace her with Iago and have a better matchup into lower to the ground decks. But I just find so much value from this card. Being able to utilize her with bounce effects like Madam M Elephant or Mother Knows Best is exceptionally powerful. If you've ever sat across from me at a tournament, at a DLC, you should always, even if I'm not playing Emerald that day, you should always be afraid of this card because I will find ways to win with her that you would not see coming. Yeah, love her. Love this card. Ursula Deceiver. So it's funny because I'm talking about how I wanted to play an Emerald deck just for Ursula Deceiver, and then I only play 3. It's because she is good when she's good. She's impactful when you need to play her, but you don't always want to play multiple. You don't always want to have to play her in certain situations. So I chose to run 3 to heavily value the ones that I do draw, the ones that I do come across in my mulligan, over just having a million that I can throw out in late game drawing a 1-3, But this card is amazing. Out of this little tier list, blue steel, ton of songs. Purple steel, not a ton of songs, but very impactful songs. Green blue, a ton of impactful songs. Green purple, mirror match, obviously there's a lot of songs. Blurple, not too many. This is a bad matchup for her. But Amber Emerald, they have an entire deck based around songs now, and you can almost guarantee hits with Ursula at times. So a hugely impactful card. Play her very well. Cheshire Cat Inexplicable. 3 cost, inkable, 3/4. Boost 2. When you put a card under this character, you may move up to 2 damage counters from chosen character to chosen opposing character. So this is a Bell Light card, Bell Accomplished Mystic, that can reuse the effect turn after turn. And then if you have a combination with a bounce card, can even become a form of card advantage by utilizing this effect. This Cheshire Cat is one of the most insane cards I've seen out of this set. Very, very powerful, very good at covering weaknesses. We want our opponent who's playing the aggro deck to freeze. We want them to not quest in front of us so we can scale. And this card is a terrifying card to quest in front of because there are so many punishes to it. I love it. Love this card. I had a play over the weekend where I had boosted it 3 times over the course of a game. It was very hard for my opponent to favorably remove it, so there was just times I was boosting, times I think I boosted for nothing one time too. But then I sang a Mother Knows Best onto it. I used it to sing a Mother Knows Best onto itself. I bounced the Cheshire Cat plus the 3 cards under it into my hand, and I basically turned my Mother Knows Best into a draw 4. Very strong, very quirky. Moving forward, 3 cost inkable, Clarabelle Contented Wallflower. You should know this card. When you play this character, if your opponent has more cards in hand than you may draw a card. Simple. I found it very hard to resolve this effect. Typically, I was always trying to draw more than my opponent, and in a lot of situations they were just trying to get to a Goliath where this card doesn't really matter so much anyways. Definitely the worst card in the deck, I would say, but having that shift target for Clarabelle allows you to get to her so much sooner and threaten her in different matchups. I have removed this card from later builds, but it's always something to reconsider and move on with. I've discussed the Prince Philip combo, but the 3 cost has a lot of interesting plays in this deck. You can boost it and be able to take something down with 4 willpower. You can just quest with it and bounce it with Elephant or Mother Knows Best and just use it as an effective lore threat. It has a lot more utility than just stand there until you draw the shift. Genie Wish Fulfilled. 4 cost uninkable, 2/4. Why am I saying that? Y'all know Genie. He's been around for about a year now. One of the most dominant cards in the meta last set. Still very strong. There has been some more answers introduced for Genie, but I still do not think that makes him a bad card. Very good. It just allows us to progress the game while not going lower in cards. You just very rarely feel bad about drawing a Genie. And this is a 8 uninkable deck, so it's hard to get choked up on him. 3 Madame Elephant. So once again, if you played in the Fabled meta, you're very well aware of what this card can accomplish. This deck, it has just the added benefit of being able to bounce your boost characters for draw, being able to bounce something like it. Say you swing an Iago into a Daisy Duck, then you can bounce it to save it from the clapback and replay it to threaten another card on the next turn. Very strong. You can bounce your Prince Philips, your Ursulas. One of my favorites is in the late game, bouncing your Hades looking for a deal and being able to replay it and just abuse your opponent with this card. Just having a bounce effect is very strong. It's also a little bit of a purple steel band-aid. Purple steel is a difficult matchup for this deck, and we want cards that just they just can't deal with, and this falls into that category. 3/7 stat line, when you play this character, bounce a card to your hand or banish her. And at the start of your turn, you may move up to 2 damage counters from this character to chosen opposing character. This really disincentivizes aggressive decks to turn sideways until they can establish some form of protection or just a board that's too wide for you to deal with. Does everything we want, really. We just want our opponents to freeze up, and I think this card accomplishes it very well. Oh, and you can also bounce Webby and replay and have some really interesting stuff to abuse with the ward effect. And protecting your Webby from going down is always good. Hades looking for a deal. Talked about this card a little bit, but in context of this deck, it is very threatening because opponents don't often want to give us 2 cards because we can threaten the Prince Philip shift. I think the only matchup Hades feels not so good into is into opposing Clarabelle decks because it can give them the draw. But sometimes I just don't even mind. Goliath is an interesting problem for Hades because Goliath essentially shuts off Hades. But we have some of the best spot removal for Goliath in the game. You make them take a tempo loss, so say they have Goliath. We play Hades, we target whatever. They, of course, give us the 2 draws, because we're going to have to discard them, right? Well, if we have a Mother Knows Best or a You're Welcome in hand and bounce their Goliath back to their hand so we don't have to deal with the discard, we effectively just kind of played them in a way. We get the 2 draws and we get to the ability to replay out our hand, and they either have to replay that Goliath, which is a little bit of a tempo loss, or they have to concede on the effect, and our Mother Knows Best or You're Welcome was, well, Mother Knows Best is essentially just a removal card. Fantastic. I love this card. I think this is the best deck to abuse him. Demona was primarily here to stun opposing Goliaths and other gargoyle related strategies. Demona combos very well with You're Welcome. So if you go You're Welcome, you sing it with like a Hades, put 2 extra cards into their hand. Most of the time they are not drawing off of Demona, so you can play her and you get the refill and your opponent does not. And that was always a really fun way to utilize her. Really cool card. Definitely want to experiment more with in the future. I do believe I dropped her from my latest version of the deck, but it doesn't mean I'm never going to revisit. Clarabelle, I think, is just probably one of the best comeback mechanics in the game right now, especially if your deck gets to 7 ink pretty quickly. You can just, doesn't matter how far behind you are in other ones. In every matchup, she finds a way to shine, including in Blue Steel. There are ways you can play around Goliath and be able to profit off of this card. Really fascinating, really cool card, and I think it's really her time to shine again. We talked about the Philip and the Malicious. Mother Knows Best just being a form of roughly spot removal at the moment. To say that, you never want to bounce like a Hades or something that's going to be terrible to you if you bounce it, but just utilizing it to have just a very aggressive tempo push into the board and just getting yourself like some space in the early game is the best way to put this card, because we really just want to scale and let our board wipe and our purple cards carry in the late game. And then finally, You're Welcome. Just once again, actual spot removal. The downsides are mitigated by Clarabelle, sometimes Demona, sometimes just by being in a particular matchup where you don't care to give them the 2 cards. A lot of times, like Blue Steel, before you get into the hyper late, they can only play 1 card a turn. So like they're punished for you're welcoming them is like sail, ink, and then play the card they were going to play anyways. And usually I don't mind that. Very strong, very just interesting deck. A very difficult deck to play. If you take this list and go out and take it to locals league this week, you may notice there's a lot of complex situations. You can find a way to make that thrive for you. But here is a different version of the deck that I just showed you. There's no Clarabelles in this deck. So this deck is inherently a little less top-end powerful. Like, we have the Philip, but up until you get to him, like 5 costs is where the deck tops out at. Instead of utilizing Clarabelle, we're using Pull to Lever and Wrong Lever as the advantage and removal sources of the deck. We still have Mother Knows Best, we still have Malicious. Really cool deck. I just wanted to highlight it for a moment. You have the Dumbo engine to sustain you in the late game. If you ever have like a Prince Philip board wipe into Dumbo with evasives, like turning this sideways with Dumbo, even though you give up the 3 lore, it just feels insulting. Like your opponent just got their board wiped, and now you're just saying, I don't even need the 3 lore, I just want the card. But just something feels unfair about playing this in a deck with a board wipe. Blessed that he wasn't, the Dumbo wasn't around when Be Prepared was here. But I think this is one of the best decks for utilizing this card. Because when you play this character, draw a card, then discard a card. That combines really well with Pull the Lever and Wrong Lever. Pull the Lever is just a choose one, draw 2 cards, or each opponent chooses and discards a card. So just lots of strong sustain there. But the Wrong Lever says, choose one, return chosen character to that player's hand. Or you can put a card named Pull the Lever from your discard on the bottom of your deck to put chosen character on the bottom of that player's deck. So it becomes a 3-cost inkable Dragonfire if you have the Pull the Lever in the discard. And the Scrooge just loves discarding Pull the Lever. With the Scrooge going sideways, you have really cool cards like Cheshire Cat and Aquila Forest Runner to be able to punish your opponents for removing your Scrooge from the board. Just basically encouraging them to just let you quest. Because you don't lose a card, but they're going to lose a card in the clapback. Aquila is a card that I'm going to talk about a little bit in my later lists, but a very strong card. I think I saw this in Tiago's pre-set in green-purple list. And I was like, wow, that card's cool. And then I didn't revisit it until after I had already played in the 10K. And then I look and I'm like, this answers a lot of our problems. 3-cost inkable, 2/5 stat line. The 5 willpower on a 3-cost is very impactful. But ahead of the pack, you can pay 1 ink to give this character +1 strength this turn. You can do that as many times as you want. This thing can take out Hades in the late game. This thing can take out Tinkerbells. This thing can even take out a Vincenzo Santorini if you have enough ink. Aquila, very strong. One of my favorite cards from the set. Has just absolutely won over my heart in the last couple. But in this deck, you know, you have Scrooge, it goes sideways, Aquila cleans up whatever, puts your Scrooge back to hand, and then you replay the Scrooge. Simple, strong. Only 2 Scrooge. I think you could go up to 3 because you can always discard Scrooge for Scrooge. But at the end of the day, you really just want one Scrooge in rotation. And I think 2 is kind of a sweet spot, but I wouldn't be mad to play 3. Uninkables are only at 9, so you'd go up to 10. Wouldn't be too bad at all. But finally, we've made it to my list, my latest list, the list that I have just been having the time of my life playing. This list over the weekend won it was a tournament in Dallas, Texas. I don't know the exact size of it or anything, but some very good players, very powerful players in attendance there. But yeah, so let's talk about it. The first thing I did is I cleaned up my 1 and 2 drop slot immensely. I have straight up 4-0s down the line and only 8 1-drops and 8 2-drops. I discovered that this deck doesn't always need to hit both a 1 into a 2-drop. If you found either a 1 or a 2, you were often fine. Why is that? Well, your 1-drops can both do things on turn 2 without having to play a 2-cost character. Your Flynn Rider can boost, that one's obvious. He is a turn 1 and a turn 2 by himself in Mulligans. But your Webby can shift, so you have that added to your plays for turn 2. And then you could always just play a 2-drop. So I really wanted to clean up that. I think my first iteration I had like 7, 8, 9 plus 8, and they were just like different numbers. And I just wanted to make it as clean as possible. Moving through for here, just to make the mulligan more simple. Providing different challenges for yourself when you're already playing a complex deck is not something you really want to do. So I just wanted to keep it simple for the time being. We can branch out in the future. Um, Cheshire Cat holds its spot, but as I've already mentioned, joined by 3 of Aquila, Forest Runner. This card just does everything you could want into matchups that are bad. Into Purple Steel, sometimes I will keep this card if I don't have like even a curve into it, just because of how much it can accomplish. But usually you want to hunt down the curve against Purple Steel. Louis Endearing Alligator. 3 cost inkable, 4/3 stat line. Madam Mim Fox vibes there. This character enters play exerted. When you play this character, chosen opposing character gains Reckless during their next turn. So this is a card that is terrible into 90% of the meta and game winning into 10% of the meta. And I felt like 2 slots in the deck for an inkable card was worth that risk. This card into Amber Steel or Amber Emerald Dogs is so powerful because if you go, so we'll talk Amber Steel first. If you go a line that is Ursula to check their hand for Strength of a Raging Fire, Louis to turn their Tiana sideways and make her crash into Louis, into Madam Mim Elephant to bounce your Louis to replay it later, there's a lot of situations that just wins you the game outright, and your opponent just has a hard time playing around it. Into Amber Emerald, a lot of times, as long as their character goes sideways before they're like making their big push, it helps you win out because you're just trying to stall them. You're trying to keep them off of their tramp. And if one character goes sideways, you can remove it and put their tramp back one entire turn sometimes. Really cool card. I think he's very powerful. He has some late game scenarios into Sapphire decks that he excels at. So say you're in a race and you need them to miss 2 to 3 lore off of their gigantic character, you can just drop a Louis on it and then they have to challenge that turn. A lot of times you can set up Louis in go-go plays. But this card definitely, if Amber Steel and Amber Emerald, the aggressive versions of these decks, start to fall out of favor, I don't think Louis is a necessity. But it's definitely worth considering, especially because those are 2 decks that can just take you by storm blind in the early rounds of a tournament when you have no idea what's coming. And just having the Louis to have the option there is fantastic. The only other new addition is the 4-cost inkable Demona, Betrayer of the Clan. 4/6 Challenger 2 for 4. This is where Lorcana is nowadays, everybody. We get a 6/6 on turn 4. Obviously, we have the Stone by Day side effect. While you have 3 or more cards in your hand, this character cannot ready. But I just think she is just a massive threat against decks that are powerful against us. So against aggro, she can basically point and click remove anything she wants to. She can deal 3 damage to a Tiana without having to pay the Tiana ink. Wild card. But even against Sapphire decks, she can one-shot a Hades. She can take out Tinkerbell. She can do just so many different power. She can take down a Clarabelle and live to tell the tale. Fantastically powerful card. Only a 2 of, because you don't always need to see more, but she's not exactly a proactive questing threat or anything of the sort, but overall, I think her upsides are way more than the down, and it just gets you a very strong anti-aggro core of Aquila, Cheshire Cat, and Demona to functionally get you through the mid-game, so you can threaten your Prince Philip combo into the late. The only other notable thing I would like to talk about for this list is I did bump Clarabelle up to 4. She was just a 3 of here, and then I bumped her up to 4 because we don't have the shift, but I always wanted to be able to ink. So I wanted to be able to ink this one. Without the shift, you would be less inclined to play into this card, whereas with the shift, with the shift target in hand, you would generally keep both. I wanted to be able to freely ink my Clarabelles, so I only played 4. Or so I upped it to 4. Yeah, I think this is legitimately if I remade this tier list, I think the one bump is I would move green purple up to strongest decks in the format. I think it's there. I think it is. I feel very confident into all the Sapphire decks. I think Purple Steel is the one weaker matchup, but it does not feel as weak as it has previously. Purple Steel in the past was a buy for them. It was an auto loss for us. It was very difficult to contend with. Um, and I think in a lot of ways, this deck really cleans up that matchup a whole lot. Like, this card is huge. This card is huge. They can remove something and require your opponent to trade back. Fantastic. Yeah, I'm gonna do a couple test hand mulligans, and after that, yeah, I think that'll be good. So we'll use this. We're gonna go to simulate. And then this first game, we're going to say it is a blind game, and we are on the play, so we're going first against a deck we don't know. This opening hand, we have 3 2-drops, not a lot else. I think it's always a mull 6 for me. You almost always want to keep any of your 1 and 2 drops in your opening hand because you're very unlikely to see another. Ursula is luckily a priority card to see in many matchups, so I think this looks fine to me. And we hit the Webby Shift. We have a 3-drop, so we have a clean 2, 3, and 2 different choices, or 3 different choices of 4-drops here. Demona can help against a more aggressive strategy. Webby is very strong into Sapphire, and Genie's Genie. Turn 1, I would probably look to ink the You're Welcome. Remember, before inking the Malicious, Mean, and Scary, that we only play 3 in the deck, and so if you ink 1, you only have 2 left in the deck. So a lot of times we may hold this if we're not up against an Emerald strategy, but we may not. Depending against the deck, I think we could let loose of one of these 4-drops on turn 2, so we can hold the Malicious another turn. We'll do a game 2 blind on the draw. On the draw blind, I think what I would always do here is just hard mull for Webby Shift, because we are on the draw, and functionally that can be powerful. Keeping the Cheshire Cat can be good into a lot of matchups, but it's not powerful into every matchup. If we miss the Webby Shift by 1 card, yeah, so I think this is just far more beneficial to mull 6 and hunt the Webby Shift as opposed, because if we kept the Cheshire Cat and we end up against a Sapphire deck, it's not accomplishing a whole lot. And if the 4-drop Webby was our 7th card, it's almost like Diablo in a way. Not quite as never as powerful as Diablo, but still. We didn't quite find the shift, but we're on the draw, so we have an extra card to see it. I think what I would do, depending on the opposing deck, I would probably ink the Clarabelle turn 1, holding on to the extra Webby, utilizing her as a combat trick to boost up a Go-Go or your other Webby to take out something they don't expect you to take out can be very powerful. So I'd probably look to ink the Clarabelle turn 1, because remember, the Prince Philip, it's important to keep the combo pieces since we're only playing 3. But after we establish what deck we're up against, we can clearly decide if Louis, Go-Go, whatever is going to be our win condition that game. Let's do Purple Steel on the play. So Purple Steel, we won the dice roll. So this hand is honestly pretty solid for a start against Purple Steel. What I would look to do, the Flynn Rider would always be a keep. The Demona is tempting, but we don't have a 3-drop, and I would like to find one. The Ursula will be our choice of 2-drop. The Hades is just too far out. We could keep the Webby to be a little bit of a combat trick, because we could always go Flynn, boost Flynn on 2 or 3, and then on 3 we could either play the Ursula and the Webby, or we could boost the Flynn and play the Webby and just become a 4 strength out of nowhere. So I think it's very valuable to keep the Webby here, but otherwise we're just hunting for one of our 3-drops. And we got probably the worst one into this matchup, but as I've already mentioned, we have different ways to push past that. Let's go Purple Steel on the draw this time. So purple steel on the draw. We've got our Flynn, so we have a turn 1, turn 2. We have our Aquila, so there's our turn 3. We have Demona, that's turn 4. This hand is exceptionally powerful. I think we're just getting rid of things we don't want to ink. The Mother's Knows Best is an interesting thought. I don't think we can afford to keep it. We'd rather find it in the late game. Sometimes it can be worth to steal tempo back utilizing your Aquila, but also sometimes I'd just rather swing the Aquila in. But the Demona leads me to believe I should keep the Mother Knows Best. My reasoning for that is Flynn should freeze their 1-drop and make it a difficult decision to quest with their 2-drop. Aquila will freeze their 3-drop unless they have some way to remove it from the board. So on turn 4, Aquila can sing Mother Knows Best, and then Demona can protect our Aquila because they will likely have to double swing into it, and Demona can threaten the clapback on whatever went in. So I think we keep the Mother Knows Best with that logic. And we ended up with an absolutely stellar hand. Turn 1 would be inking a Flynn, or no, we would probably ink an Aquila. Turn 1, play the Flynn. Turn 2, we could always ink the Flynn, but we're basically looking to do the Flynn, boost Flynn into either Aquila or Cat. I think these two are very strong into each other because they function so well together, because you can utilize both of their effects with your Inkwell. So you could pay 2 for the Cat, pay 2 to make Aquila a 4/5, and they function very well with each other. But what we're really looking to do with this hand is Flynn Rider is our turn 1 and 2, Aquila would be 3, Demona would be 4, and then Cheshire Cat plus boost would be 5. This is very strong against purple steel on the draw. Let's do a couple mulligans into Sapphire decks. I think Sapphire decks you basically mull the same into every single one of them. Shocker, we're going to hard mull for Webby, only keeping powerful 1-drops. So only keeping our Flynn Rider here basically. So this would be an easy mull 6. We're just really looking for Webby. Doesn't matter really which Sapphire deck we're going into. Flynn Rider can pressure in the early turns. The only 1-drop they have, like, they all trade into him, and we generally don't mind. Mull 6, we did not hit our Webby, but we do have a pretty interesting hand. Not the best into Sapphire, but could be worse. Flynn and boost for turn 2. I would probably look to ink the Elephant, and followed up by maybe the secondary Flynn, but this amount of lower to the ground characters makes me, I'd probably ink an Elephant than an Ursula, just depending. Let's do Sapphire on the draw. Oh, we have a Webby piece, wonderful. So yeah, we're just hard mulling for Webby. The only other card you really want to keep is like a Flynn Rider, 9 times out of 10. We did not get there, but that's okay. Against Sapphire, we don't necessarily have to be in a rush. Sometimes we can just establish Webby on turn 4, and she catches us up, and that's all we need from her. Would probably ink I'd probably ink an Ursula, unless they're on Sapphire Steel, and then I would lead off with inking the Demona. And yeah, just kind of curve out your hand into Webby, catch back up, and look to hold on to your bombs like Clarabelle so you can have strong cards to play once you get your ramp on. Let's do another Sapphire deck on the play. Yeah. So no reason to keep an auxiliary Webby, just ship everything else. And we didn't get there. We never will. One more. We're gonna get her this time. Keep the Flynn Rider, as I've said before. Otherwise, I think all this is pretty simply shippable. Mull them back. And we got half a Webby. We're good at getting the half, and not so good at getting the whole thing. But yeah, I do think this is going to be a meta contender for the remainder of set 10, and maybe even beyond that. This could be the birth of a new archetype in Lorcana, and I'm so thrilled to be at the forefront of, you know, not only just talking about this deck, but introducing it to everyone, teaching everyone. It's such a fantastic deck, and I really hope you guys enjoy. Any questions, leave them down below. Feel free to contact me over Discord, Twitter, here, if you need anything. If you have any, just concerns about the deck. And I think that's it. Hey, thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, peace.